Hey, what's up, you guys? How's it going? Peter Han here, and just joining you on YouTube to basically give you a little bit of information about some reviews of pens upcoming that I like to be able to do. First one coming up that I was able to get my hands on is actually this one here. This is the Uniball Zento. This is a signature model. This one in particular has been kind of like hyped up recently, so I've been very curious about this ballpoint gel pen basically, and I wanted to get my reviews hands on it just to get the sense of if this is a nice sketching pen, one that I will be able to maybe use a bit further. It's in the package. I was able to also get the refill as well too. We'll test these a bit separately because this is the actual cartridge is still the same one that's in here. These refill ones are obviously separate, so I might even test out one of these just off to the side just to see if the ink quality is the same. I believe this one should apply to this one as well too. But in any case, this Zento model from Uniball has been a little bit harder to get. So I was able to go on Amazon and find a resale version, which priced it way higher than the actual retail price. But we'll see if that was actually worth it and give it a test and a go. We'll do some kind of scrutinizing tests of things like ink quality, like I said, usability, practicality, weight, material, um, just general response in terms of the hand, how it feels. Is it smooth? Is it rough? The kind of paper types, and also if the ink smudges or not. Water tests as well too, and something that might even just kind of carry around day to day, or if it's something that I'll be using more into the office. So come join me. We'll jump over to the camera and we'll take a look at this in closer detail. Okay, so back at my table, we do have the Zento pen in front of us, and we'll pull it out of the package. We'll take a look at some of the refills in just a minute, so we'll put that to the side. We'll just be using some kind of base white paper for the time being. Nothing too special in particular, but I just wanted to more get a sense of the look of the tool itself. I've watched a few reviews myself here and there, and I thought, the pen seemed interesting. And that's kind of where I found out about this particular tool was, there was a few postings on social media, people kind of talking about how this particular pen was selling out in Japan. And the Uniball brand I'm, relatively familiar with because I primarily use their Uniball Signo. And it's the Signo brand, which comes in black, white, and I believe various other colors, a gel pen. The white one I used since I was a student for highlights and such like that for tone paper. The black one, ink-wise, I would use every now and again. For gel pens, I primarily prefer things like the High-Tech C's, Muji pens as well too, and a few other properties and brands. But the Uniball brand, in terms of the Zento line, I'm not that familiar with, and only just discovered recently. This signature model, I believe, is just a unique sort of casing, which I believe is aluminum as well too. And there is the Zento model, which I believe is going to be using the same exact ink from what I can understand. It's just the signature model has this very special sort of like handle and material base was made of. So we'll take a look at it and see how it handles and feels in the hand and draw with this gel pen because I've yet to really draw with and sketch with this one. And we'll see how it kind of reacts. So this one I purchased, like I said earlier in the intro, on Amazon, and I found it as a resale. And I believe the retail price on this is about 30 some odd dollars. Let me do a quick double check on price. Zento. Just so I can kind of get a sense of what the actual price is. I believe retail is 38. So at $38, it's not necessarily a very cheap pen either too for a gel pen primarily, especially if it is using the same kind of like, again, ink cartridges as many of the other lines are. But we'll see what makes this one a bit special. Now, I paid a little bit more, about double the price as a resale on Amazon. So hopefully it'll be worth its price. So the packaging here is quite solid. I like package design in general. Some people will find this a bit too much, maybe like a little bit over designed. But for myself, I do enjoy things like packaging and graphics and how things are kind of presented and such like that. So you can see it's got a backing here to protect the clip onto the cap. Here's the tool itself. We'll put this back in. And I'll keep the packaging for the time being, just in case we may want to display it, take a photograph of it later on. So we'll put that aside. So here's the tool itself. Again, it's aluminum made. It's pretty lightweight. I believe this back here is plastic. This is a dark gray, has a slightly bluish tint. Ever so much cool, but definitely more on the charcoal to gray. Definitely the back half plastic is just pure gray, but right here in the metal side, aluminum is a little bit more of a bluish tint. I've seen some of the Zento models in terms of the clip design and the overall pen design as well too. It does borrow resemblance to those designs as well, using this very similar kind of metal clip that's obviously attached to the cap with their logo Uni on this end. You can see the Zento branding on the back end as well too. Over here where it kind of lights up. I know it's going to be a little bit hard to see on the camera maybe, but it does also then have a slight silver back end too. Overall weight, like I said, is pretty light. And you can see the overall size of my hand. We can even use other tool sets, like let's say a Sharpie, to get a size comparison. So a tiny bit smaller, but not that much. This is a magnetic, so it's not twist off. Just pull right off of it. You can hear it, metal as well too. I believe it was, yeah, magnetic on the back end, so it just kind of clips and snaps shut. So it does create a nice balance to that point. The clip doesn't really seem to get in the way. I tend to hold the pen a little bit further back as well too. So general ergonomics feels pretty solid. It has a nice diameter to it, so it has some material, substantial material to hold on to. So it feels nice in the hand overall. You can see how thin it is on the back end here. So again, just silhouette design in general, I do quite find it nice. It has a little bit of like a space age sort of design work. I think some people have mentioned it where like you can see this as being like an astronaut's pen or something like that. Where astronaut pens are more ballpoint. I don't think they would have used gel pens. But still, like I said, pretty well constructed. I'm sure they tested that hundreds of times. The actual grip portion is also plastic as well. Same sort of silver lining over here. If I unscrew this, we'll take it apart. You will find the actual ink cartridge. Now, this is the base ink cartridge that's been used, well, coming from this particular pen. I did not replace it, and I haven't really used it, but I did take off the little end plastic piece right there, so just to kind of see the end tip. But I haven't really used it to get a sense of how the feel the ink is. This model is the UBRZ05. This is the sizing wise. There's a 3 and a 5, I believe. So this is a 5mm roller ball. So there's a 3, which is I believe a different color. I think it's a silver, and then the charcoal is going to be in the 5mm. So I opted out for the 5mm because one, I like the darker design, but also that sizing I think is much more applicable to the kind of things that I do. The 3 I tend to find a bit too thin. I find the same way with things like High-Tech C's from Pilot brand, where the 3 is just a little bit too thin. I want to zoom in a little bit closer here so we can check out the lines. We can compare this to, if you can find the other gel pens I tend to go for. Mostly things like the Muji pens could be a good one to use. Here's the Uniball Signo. We'll bring in a ballpoint just to compare a little bit. And we'll also grab, let's see, how about the High-Tech? We're going to do a little bit of tool comparisons, and this is the Muji. So all these tools are gel-based pens right here. So this is our Zento line. This is the G-Tech C. This is Pilot. High-Tech C, G-Techs are essentially the same. These don't necessarily have the roller ball in them. It's almost like a, kind of like a hypodermic needle, if anything else. Here's the flow of this one. Feels relatively comparable. This is, I believe, a 0.3 size. This is the Muji brand. This is also a 0.38. This is our ballpoint. This is just Bic Crystal. And you'll start to get a sense a little bit of the line. It didn't seem to happen too much on the Zento line. I'll try to get onto the side. What I've always been a little bit critical of when it comes to gel pens, rollerball pens, is at the end of the actual point, which is designed with a little roller ball at the end of it. Here's the tip of the pen. And it'll basically roll the ink onto the paper. And what happens a lot of times with these sort of gel pens is that you'll get a bit of that sort of splotch, a little blot mark. You'll see it down here with the downstrokes as well too. The downstroke is going from top down, top down, top down. Now if I hold the pen a little bit, you'll notice the blotching mark very distinctly. I'll zoom in a bit closer. Let's move a little bit faster. I can chop away at it, and you'll start to see again where it has a little bit of skip, a little bit of blot marks. Right now we're just doing a general stress test onto the ink and onto the pen itself. Let's try horizontal movements again. A little bit of turn of the paper. Doing a little bit more of a lighter touch. Just seeing how consistent the stroke of the line is. Let's go upstroke. Let's cross. So again, with these gel pens, the flow of the ink on the Zento seems to be fairly consistent. It does pull up a bit of ink at the very initial contact to the page. As I'm holding the pen right now onto the paper, we'll lift it away. You'll see a pretty significant absorption of ink. Now this is, again, like I said, just a loose sheet, 8.5 by 11. It's a bit of a smoother, close to a Bristol paper. It's not necessarily as slick as Bristol, but it's within that same consistency. So even if I just hold the pen right up to the edge of the paper without rolling it, the ink is actually pulling into the paper itself. If I just kind of touch it, it drips down. So there is a strong flow of ink out of this one. Let's compare the Zento line again with, let's say, the Muji. And the Muji is a very cheap pen. This is about, I think, $1 still at this point. So this is Zento. Here is Muji. We'll hold the pen on, let it sit for a little bit, hold the pen on. And this is not a fresh new pen, this one I've had for a little bit, just to test it out. But granted, it is also a thinner pen. Now, even if I actually just move, hold the pen, move, this gel pen will also still kind of blotch up a little bit. As I touch it, flow of the ink is relatively solid. I've always found that Muji pens tend to have a pretty even flow, a consistent flow of ink as well too. Let's bring in the G-Tech Pilot. We'll hold the pen. And this is a 0.3 size. You'll see a significant amount of ink pump coming out of this one. And so this is not a roller ball. Like I said, this is more like a needle tip. So the flow of ink is also pretty steady. Most of these gel pens have the same sort of character, which is that they tend to, like I said, blot up a little bit. So the absorption of the ink into the paper, pretty strong. In relation to, let's say, the ballpoint pen, this is the Bic. Now, just to see difference, and some of you may not necessarily fully comprehend the difference between the kind of pens we're dealing with here. Gel pens like this one here are very different sort of ink consistency, where the Bic ballpoint pen is more oil-based. So this will not pull up, right? It's more sticky, if anything else. You'll see a little bit of dot, if anything, within that. And it's a bit more of a drier touch to it. So the line will be a lot more faint, a bit softer. So a lot of people that work in things like rendering techniques and whatnot would really prefer the Bic, if anything else. So what would be the significance of using one or the other? It comes down to preference at that point. There's not really not much more than that. All pens are going to be good to use. Even within these lines from the Zento, Muji to the G-Tech, there really wasn't a huge amount of variation to them. We'll do a quick water test as well too, just to kind of see if the inks hold up fairly well. We'll work backward. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll work backward this time. Let's go to the Bic first, G-Tech, Muji, then to the Zento. So for right now, onto the Bic, because this is an oil-based ink with water, this will not bleed as much. The water will pick it up a little bit and move it around slightly, but it won't be a huge amount of visual sort of like cue as to its, I guess, blending. To the G-Tech over here. And again, there's not a lot of water on this right now. I'm just kind of keeping it a little bit damp. Let's go to the G-Tech. We'll just run it right across. And then we'll run it. So it picks a bit of the ink. You can start to see it kind of like getting gray in between the lines. But it's not too bad. Usually the high-techs are usually much more water soluble. Here's the Muji pen. Wipe it off a little bit. A lot more pull. So this will actually smudge. You can see a much more significant amount of gray. So the G-Tech is pulling a little bit. It's more of a cool ink as well too. The Muji a little bit warm. The Bic you can see barely any. Let's go to the Zento. This has been sitting now for about a minute. So I would say it's comparable to the G-Tech. Pulls a little bit. I would say tone-wise closer to the Muji. A little bit warmer, neutral. But in terms of the amount of pull of ink, closer to the G-Tech. Which is good. You know, I don't necessarily use gel pens for things like watercolor or marker techniques, but if I were to bring it in, I would maybe feel a little bit confident using the Zento for stuff like that. Let's do a quick dry smudge. Nothing much there on the Zento. Muji, you can see it run right there. It picks up on my fingertips and it smudges it. Here, the G-Tech. None. Of course, with the Bic, because it's oil-based, it won't dry as quickly. So you can actually dry smudge it fairly easily too. So so far, in terms of the kind of absorption of the ink to the paper, and of course, in terms of its hardiness, it seems like the Zento ink and the G-Tech ink are pretty good on this very normal paper to be able to hold up to things like water and any sort of smudging. Let's just go back to some of these other lines now that I've drawn them as well too. Let's use now a little bit more water. Let's use a whole bunch of water. So it pulls, it smudges it. Now these are some of the other strokes. I'm just kind of feeling them out. This was a Zento again up top. Not too bad, surprisingly. Now this seems a little bit darker because of its moisture absorbing to the paper, but giving it a little bit of time, it may start to, let me zoom out a little bit here. It may begin to like fade out, and you may not see that dampness as much. Other than that though, seems like we're doing pretty good on that paper. Let's bring back in the Zento, and we're gonna go into a fresh new piece of paper and give it a little bit more work into it, just kind of see how it feels onto the page, and we'll go from there, right? Okay, so going into a new piece of paper, we're going to strictly now use the Zento and see how this pen just feels as a complete sketch overall. As I do so, you know, we'll kind of talk a bit about the feeling of it, just general usability. You know, we kind of tested some of the other type of gel pens and the ballpoint, and kind of talk a bit about why the preference for me would be one or the other, or such case. As I stated before, these sort of gel pens I actually used a lot more when I was a student, and it was something that was quite heavy in terms of the high-tech C, you know, the Pilot pen. The G-Tech model that we have here right now was a pretty good pen as well too, but the high-tech model was the one that we were commonly using. So for the Zento to feel the way it does is pretty familiar in a lot of ways. So what we're going to sketch right now is maybe some sort of a character. I was thinking of just drawing something from the Monkey King line, because I have these like figures and toys kind of around me on my desk, so it kind of inspired me. And it's that pig character, his partner and his friend that's on there. So let's do like a version of that. So we'll start right off with, maybe I'm going to have him like run and jump or something like this. So we'll start with maybe kind of the head up in this area here. Now what I'm trying to get a feel of right now is flow state, consistency of the line. Does it break? Do I need a lot of pressure? And so there's a few things in the area of category that tends to be a hindrance for me. Things that I may want to avoid in certain type of pens. And there are things, you know, within these kind of tools that you're not going to be able to avoid. It's just their nature of how they tend to operate and work. Gel pens in general, I find, as you saw in some of the ink tests earlier, tend to be a bit blotchy. So as you put the ink down, the absorption of the ink into the paper tends to make it splot out. So as it's blotching or splotting, it creates a lot of little dots everywhere, which I'm not very fond of. but also then has the problem of if you run your hand across it, it would smudge because the gel pen ink also doesn't dry as quickly compared to, let's say, like a felt tip pen ink. Ballpoint is more oily, so it would be a lot more difficult for it to dry out completely without sitting there for a long period of time. But gel pen does have a quick dry. This is one of the properties of this particular tool, this ink, that what they promote is this idea of a quick drying ink. So as it's already sitting there right now, if I just run my hand across it. So yeah, no smudging right now. And I think that's why it's also relatively water fast, that it doesn't smudge or blur or get water soluble as quickly or as heavily as some of the other gel pens. We'll give him like a beaded necklace around here. Give him some of the clothing underneath. This is going to be his head, brow area. Basing it on a boar, as he usually is. From the pressure thing, the ink's sort of water solubility, smudging, the ink seems to be holding up okay. The tool, like I said, has a bit of a nice diameter to it, so it's not straining the fingers too much. If you tend to have bigger hands, you may want to consider getting some type of like foam or gel covering on top of this. A little bit cumbersome because you don't want to take it on and off all the time. So more than likely, you probably wouldn't do that. But still, the weight of it doesn't really cause a lot of tight grip. Usually pens that are much heavier than these makes you feel like you have to hold on to it tighter because it feels it's going to slip out of your hand. But this one feels pretty good. Pressure-wise so far, once you get the pen going, doesn't seem to require a lot of heavy pressure to get the ink flow in on the paper. That's where you tend to kind of fight with the tool set, where it doesn't give you a smooth initial sort of touch. It'll skip a little bit, or it doesn't necessarily actually release in terms of the ink onto the paper until you really give it some pressure. I will say at the very beginning, it probably skipped here and there a little bit, probably because I kind of left the pen out. With these sort of gel pens, if you do let it sit for a little bit, it does tend to dry out the end of the nib. So it doesn't break it in any way. So you'll be able to kind of pick it up and roll it around a little bit. It'll get going like a ballpoint. Where felt tip pens, if you let it dry out, then it's toast. So that would be some of the benefits of gel pens. Is it's smooth, and that's one of the characteristics of gel pens in general. There's smoother lines. There's less resistance. It'll draw smoothly onto most papers. This one's working pretty well. The ink is a bit faster drying. So it's really good for people that like to write, take notes. And for sketching, I would say it has that handleability of quickness and fast line production. So it has a lot of benefits there as well. So what would be some of the downsides to it? Well, typically with a gel pen, as I said, in the ink test, the smudging and the water dilution tends to be one of the hindrances as to why I wouldn't want to use it, because for a lot of my work afterwards, I tend to apply things like watercolor on top of that. So I would want there to be a fastness of the ink onto the page. So this is why I would turn to a lot more archival inks, felt tip pen inks, pigment inks, once in a while Indian inks as well too. But with this particular tool, we may do a quick run, a test with a watercolor. Once we get to a certain amount of this, we'll see how it goes. So far, smooth, no more skipping going on. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Get the feel of the actual line. I tend to hold the pen pretty far back. This is so I have clearance to see where I'm actually going, where the lines are. I tend to avoid holding it too close like this. You can't really see where your pen is. So holding it further back, there's enough length for my hand to rest. If the cap was off, it's a little bit harder to use because the pen wants to kind of slip into my hand. So the cap is, I would say, a necessity, but it also tends to counterbalance it. It's a bit front heavy. It's definitely front heavy. But it's not to the point where it feels like it's imbalanced. For instance, like the digital tools, let's say like the Apple Pencil, especially the older models, the older generation ones, I found those to be very off balance. They were very front heavy, heavy in general. So it was kind of painful to hold after a while. Certain fountain pens, like the Kawakos, the brass models and stuff like that, are tend to be really heavy as well too. Um, Most gel pens, plastic based, shouldn't be any issues. This one being metal, the aluminum, which is only the casing to the back, which is interesting because again, this is all plastic to the front, but most of the weight is coming from the plastic, not the metal itself. We're gonna have them jumping from like cube to cube in space. Again, this is a test run, just to see how this feels. Nothing too significant of a sketch at the moment. Kind of based off of the Wukong version of the pig character a little bit here. I kind of have a deep sort of memory now from this year playing that game so much. So the influence of those designs from that particular video game has seems to have crept in, even without really thinking about it. We'll give it some pants. Stretch out here. Let's try to see if we can also move a little bit faster with some of the lines. In the beginning, I was being a little bit tempered with my movements, trying to give it an even pressure. As I work my way down to, let's say, the lower half, let's see if we can move a little bit differently, a bit more flow, a bit more energy, and see if the pen can keep up. So the tool, based on then speed to pressure, usually, as I move at this speed with a bit of a lighter touch, the pen would kind of give way. The ink wouldn't hold. It would skip a little bit, especially if I move back and forth in several different directions. Um, Felt tip pens usually can do okay, but they tend to have a bit of a drier tip. So again, if the shape of the felt tip nib has been compromised based on pressure, it may not really work based on certain angles. Ballpoints usually work a lot better, but again, they're more softer, lighter touch lines, more oil based, which can smudge pretty well as well too. But it has an intention of a ballpoint used for more rendering techniques. Where gel pens like this, I'd be primarily using for just line hatching. Where with the ballpoint, I could really just build the values and such like that, layer, layer, layer. We'll play with a little bit of hatching in this as well too. Not too much because I do want to try a bit of watercolor on this. So we'll see how well the ink can hold. But I think in some of the areas of shadow groupings, regions, we can kind of play with that. Just some of the fabric material kind of moving around. We'll give them like hoof toes. I'm just trying to move a little bit differently to the bottom end just to see how it reacts. Kind of moving in more in a back and forth sort of motion, trying to see if I can like break it, snap the line. But it seems to be clinging on pretty well so far. When I say clinging on, it's more like where the ink is gripping the paper. As I move with the roller ball on there, there's a tendency where the flow of the ink on the roller ball can skip. This is where then you will basically lose grip from the ink to the paper. We'll do more of a gestural sort of so right there's a lighter touch, a little bit of a lighter flow, but you'll see how that line skips right there. So there's a little bit of sign of a very light touch and pressure. This is where I'm slowing down a little bit to speed up. Once you get the pen going, it holds on. But I think if you let it sit ever so long, move right into a light touch, fast pressure, or fast speed that is, it'll lose grip. Any sort of heavy pressure responds well. That will be one of the big benefits as we have our classes in dynamic sketching, where we tend to primarily use felt tip pens. With the felt tip pens over time, with pressure and heavy grip, it can alter the shape of the nib itself due to the fibrous material, and on any kind of paper, even if smooth, can act like sandpaper. So over time, as you kind of grind that pen back and forth, it'll reshape that nib. So then it can compromise the ink flow at times, which forces maybe your hand to be in a certain position to have better flow of ink. So if you're heavy-handed, this is where people tend to want to kind of go towards these sort of gel pens, because it holds up the pressure obviously a lot better due to the metal tip. I just want to make him look like he's jumping from like block to block. But so far, I would say usability seems pretty good. Would it be a daily carry for me? Well, I mean, then I'm going to kind of want to compare this to a daily sort of carry I would normally have, which is fountain pens. And those are the kind of tools I would normally be carrying. And again, these sort of tool sets I rarely buy these days, due to the fact that this is a ink cartridge that has to be replaced at some point. In terms of how long this will last, I mean, that's a fair question because obviously I haven't really used this pen just yet. But knowing things like the G-Tex and High-Tex, the amount of ink is going to be comparable and similar. And these ones would last me maybe a solid month of steady use. So I would say the Zento here wouldn't be that much different in terms of just longevity, lifespan of the tool set. Again, I'm going to be very kind of blunt about this, where I'm not finding this to be that much different than using, let's say, the Pilot High-Tex and G-Tex. I'm not finding it that much different compared to, let's say, like the Muji pen that I just showed you as well, too. I do find that the Muji pen tends to splatter ink a little bit more, so if I move a bit quickly, it'll catch paper and kind of splatter the ink. This doesn't do that. It does have a little bit of blotting, but as we're using it, again, you'll start to see it here, in these sort of little hatch marks, a little bit of blotting marks here and there. In the boxes you see right there, that sort of mark right on that point, these sort of points. This is just a natural sort of like flow of the ink of the pen itself. Has nothing really to do with what I'm doing. Now, granted, if the faster you move, you may be able to avoid those things, but even with a little bit of pressure, slight, sort of like hold of the pen to the paper, the ink will absorb. I would say paper will make a difference in this case. Vellum papers, marker papers, Bristol, illustration boards should be pretty solid. Even watercolor paper as well too. This is just a regular sort of like white. It's not, I mean, it's printer-like paper. It's just a little bit heavier cardstock. Probably about an 80-pound paper. But even then, it's a little bit more absorbent. So the ink is going right into it. Let's check the other side real fast. So, no bleed through, which most gel pens should not. So it's good to see that. Well, here's our little pig character. Okay, so now that we got the feel of the drawings, it's been sitting here in some of the areas now for a good, couple minutes now. And we're going to shift it over to using maybe a watercolor. So we'll set that up, and we'll move into that section. Okay, so transitioning over to a new setup here with the same drawing. We have the watercolor out now. I'm just going to be using a water brush here. And this contains only water at the moment, nothing else. Let me see if I have another brush. This one should work just fine. Has a little bit of water left in it, but and the ink has been. Let's see if I can get a bit of water flow here. This one didn't close properly. You see the brush sticking out into the side, but that's okay. I can cut that off later on. So let's just test this using just straight watercolor. Let's see if another brush in here with a bit more water. Oh, this one does. Okay, this one seems pretty good. A little bit more water in here. We'll start from the top and work our way down. We'll just kind of colorize him as we go. And I'll zoom in and out just to test it. I'll just use the base sort of paint that I have on here, which is kind of more of this sort of brownish color. And we'll see how this reacts. Now this paper, like I said, is more like a hot press paper is what it feels like. Especially the way it dries and how absorbent it is. Some of the property, the feel of it is kind of like hot press paper. Cold press, you know, will have a little bit more of a texture to it. Hot press is a bit smoother usually. Hot press to me almost feels like, I want to say like tissue paper sometimes. Especially the watercolor paper types. But this one seems to be doing okay. We'll keep going on it. So far the ink hasn't budged. That's a good sign so far for me. What I might do here is grab one more sheet of paper, do a quick test of ink on it, see if it holds a similar sort of property as it does with this paper. Because this paper, like I said, is a bit more absorbent, so the ink is most likely locking into the fibers. And because it's quick dry, it seems to be also holding fast. Again, all good things so far. Let's give him more of a burgundy-ish tunic. With this paper being so absorbent, the watercolors will not really run into each other and bleed. And we are just doing a general colorization right now. Let's also hit the sash down here. We'll make the pans more neutral. So I'm using quite a bit of water at the moment. And the ink still hasn't really budged. So where I probably would apply this to for me in everyday use is probably my traveling journals. So when I go on location somewhere, traveling to different, places, I usually would carry a little journal set for sketching, note-taking, collecting things, and I would draw in there, of course, as well too. And typically, what I'd be using in there is my fountain pens once in a while. But the fountain pens, sometimes can run out of ink after heavy use. So having a backup, lightweight, something like this to keep inside the journal might be kind of handy. So I'm probably going to take this with me. I'm traveling to Asia at the end of this year, so it might be a good opportunity to kind of find out how it then feels on the road. With a gel pen, the benefit, of course, is it's a pretty smooth line, consistent. The fountain pens can be a bit more finicky with a character of its own, but these sort of gel pens, being more just general manufacturing, can have a pretty sort of consistent sort of output. So what I'm getting right now here, I would generally expect going into using other tools, other kind of papers, the journal, being on location, I wouldn't really expect anything different. Again, the gel pen doesn't really require that much pressure, which is the beauty of it. Fountain pens, like I said, depending on the model, some can be a bit stiffer nibs, some can be softer, they can be a little bit finicky, they can skip relatively easily too. The ink can make a big difference. So with fountain pens, there's a lot more R&Ding that goes in there, in terms of my opinion, to really kind of find the tool that you like. But these sort of gel pens are kind of more plug and play. Like you get off the shelf, you know what you're gonna get. So there's really not that much sort of like pondering as to, you know, if it applies to the kind of sketching you want to do, which is great for things like, you know, note taking, journaling, quick sketching, and just a consistent line. But now that this pen and ink also seems to hold up to watercolor fairly well, this is a good option for the journal because, again, I do a lot of watercoloring in there. So for now, let's also grab another piece of paper. And I want to try maybe the actual journal itself, if I have one. I think I have one over here somewhere. So we'll cut away, we'll come back, set up the table again with some brand new materials, and we'll give that a go. But so far, seems to work pretty well. Not too bad. We'll come right back. Okay, so coming back, we do have a couple of the journals here I want to show you guys. And I want to use this for another test with the Zento ink and pen, with something I'll be using more practical to every day. This kind of gives you an idea as to what the journals look like. This one's an older one here, filled with, you know, a bunch of just stuff I've collected over time from traveling, things that I've drawn, things that I've observed, things I would collect. So there's a lot of just stuff in here that's great for just, you know, life experience and whatnot. This one's a current one that I'm using right now, also fairly filled up at the moment, kind of on the last leg of the back end of the book. So this paper is a little bit thinner. This is the newest one, which I'll probably carry with me to Asia this year as well. So this one has a bit of a thicker paper. This is a Traveler's Company journal, and this is more of a sketch paper, and this one's more of a journaling paper. We'll stick with the thinner one because I still have pages left in this one, and we'll see how it goes. And what we'll do is we'll test forms. Zoom in here a little bit. Again, testing forms. Let's say we replicated this chair using forms. See right there, I just kind of put down a line. And we haven't drawn with this in a bit. You know, see it very faintly. This is where I touch the pen. No line, no ink, and right there with pressure, it started to come back because I moved backwards a bit here. So I'm looking at the pen up close right now, and doesn't seem to have a lot of ink coagulation. We'll keep an eye on it. Let's go back into it. Now that I've pushed the ink a little bit, it'll most likely draw. There it goes. So now that the actual ink has taken hold of the paper, seems to be running pretty smooth. Put a couple lines on there. So right there it skipped again, but I held the pen more to the edge. So right now the pen is at about an angle about this much. Bringing it down a bit further, the problem is with the roller ball is that there's a threshold in terms of the contact point. So you can't hold the pen too far off to the side. It does have to have a little bit of a degree of an angle. I would say from, 90 to about 45 is probably the most optimal. A little bit less than that, maybe like a 20-25 degree angle, a little bit harder to use. We'll test it. So here's more 90, which is hard to draw with. Here's at about a 45. More comfortable, a little skip. More at an angle, okay? So you start to see it skipping quite a bit. So this is 90, 45, about a 25 degree angle. Let's produce another cube form. This paper, even still being thinner, is smooth. It should hold up okay. It's not bleeding through. We'll let this sit for just a few seconds. We'll do a quick swipe test. A little bit of pickup right there. So where there is a bit of blotch mark, you're still going to get a little bit of smudge right there again. This is more fresh. Smudge here, smudge there. So right at those endpoints, this is one of the problems of gel pens. Again, if you have blotch marks, you got to let it sit for more than a few minutes, and it may begin to kind of settle in, dry out. Guaranteed, even without the use of watercolor, this is most likely going to bleed. Let's take one side of the, oops, there it goes. So you see it picked up a lot of ink. So this is a little bit fresher and sitting there for no more than a few seconds. So it picks up the ink and runs and bleeds. So you can tone things, which is fine, but if you're trying to do things like watercolor and you want that line to hold more permanently, this isn't ideal because again, this can also bleed into the watercolor itself, making it a little bit muddy sometimes. But we'll try a different kind of paper because again, this is thinner. It's, I would say, not as absorbent as the first white paper. I think the white paper that we're using here, the ink is just a bit more absorbent to the paper itself. So because it's absorbing into it, seems to hold. It's not bleeding. But right here with the paper that's a little bit smoother, it's slicker. It's going to bleed. So this was just pure water. Nothing but water on there. Picks it up pretty easily. Let's try a different paper. Here's our journal again. This is a brand new one. And this one is the sketch paper. Travelers Company. So this one is thicker, about the same thickness as the original paper that we had. Not as white, but definitely as thick. It's about 80-pound paper, maybe cover stock. In terms of smoothness, actually this one has a little bit more fiber to it. But we'll test it out. Let's draw the pig from a side view again, just ahead. Ink picks up right away. That extra little bit of tooth and fiber will really help. So it draws pretty smoothly on the paper. And push a bit of darks here and there, right in between some of these spots, just so we have a bit of ink really pushed in. We'll see if it holds. So this particular book is probably one I'll be carrying around with a pretty, strong amount of emphasis during my travels. So this is a good test to see if this ink will be even worth taking with me. A couple of dark spots here and there. A little bit of hatching, more marks. And we'll let that also sit for a little bit. I have a feeling this will bleed. So I'm seeing the ink right now, if I'm kind of shining it on the light, you'll see it glint a tiny little bit. So the ink is still wet on this right now. So if I just put my hand right on top of it, press, you'll see the marks. So that's the leftover residual marks. And sometimes I'll do this with ink. You just kind of take napkins or your hand, just kind of blot it. It'll absorb some of the ink off of it, the residual. It'll dry a bit faster. So that's something of a trick you can do with gel pens if you like to. Let's bring in the watercolor. Here's the watercolor to the side. And I'll keep it zoomed in. I'll use some of the paint and we'll go right on top of this. So the ink is being picked up right now. Again, it hasn't sat for very long. So it's going to bleed. But the question is, of course, how much? Because if it's a little bit of a smudging or diluting, it's still manageable. But when it starts to mix into the ink too much and picks it up way too far or too hard, it's not something I find the most ideal for me. But it also, what it does is it dilutes the line and it makes it fuzzy. So it's not terrible, but compared to, let's say, like my fountain pens, felt tip pens, for example, the felt tip brush pens. If I zoom in much closer to this, you begin to see just a bit of softness of the line. Ink does get picked up. Still holds fairly clean. It's usable. And the thing is, when it dries out, I could potentially reline it, but it's usually not something I normally do. So, again, it's one of those cases where the pen itself is, again, it's usable. But compared to what I have as an option for things where I wouldn't get this effect, felt tip brush pens, which are archival. For example, the Furinosuke from Kuretake brand, my fountain pens, which uses the platinum carbon ink, which is more water resistant, would be also nice. Those tend to take a bit of minute to kind of dry out as well too. But for a gel pen, sorry, I'm getting camera focusing loss here. It's not bad. It's not bad in comparison. Again, the Muji wouldn't be able to do this. The G-Tech High Tech typically wouldn't be able to do this either too. And we still get a bit of bleed, but still it's manageable. So the refills, I have one off to the side. And it comes out like this. And this is also the UBRZ05 model. So this one and the one that came in the pen, exactly the same type. So the refill box has the same model number. 05 is a 5mm. It's the same ink. So this is then universal in terms of what you can use it for towards other Zento models. It doesn't have to be the signature casing of the handle. It could be just a basic Zento model, which means you can use the same ink. So then the question really then is this tool worth $38? Because the other Zento models are much cheaper from what I can understand. And I haven't done a full retail check yet on that. If I looked at the Zento pens, some of the base models are like $12 to $15. Okay, so these signature models are priced higher simply due to the fact that they're a special casing. You know, the handle, the cap, the material. You know, that's all it is. So what it reminds me of is the Copic brand, and Copic, the marker company, you know, made that felt tip pen, which you can actually then replace the ink cartridge, replace the nib, replace the parts. And I think you paid and ended up paying like 15 some odd dollars, less or more, for the actual tool, the actual pen itself, with a cartridge. And the cartridge eventually, when it ran out, you replace it with a new one. And the ink and the nib is the same as every other felt tip pen Copic model that was there. But that, you know, $15 less or more, you're paying for just the special casing, you know, the actual, you know, the housing itself. And is that worth it? I mean, for me, I would say no. I love the way this looks. It does feel really nice. And I paid a lot more for it. Is it $38 worth? I would say this is probably about a good $24.99 is what I would price it at. And that would be something I would feel more comfortable paying for. $40, you know, with tax, shipping, all that sort of stuff. Again, if you love collecting pens, if you like the aesthetics of it, that could be the pull towards it. I do like the way it looks. Handles nicely. It's got a nice little feel to it. Tactile-wise, handles nicely. It's just a good weight balance to it, too. Again, the ink is the ink. It's going to use the same thing as the other Zento models. So, again, it's a very nice tool. It draws really well. It's smooth and slick like every other gel pen that I've used. But as I said, is it $38 worth? I like it, but not at that price point. If it was just a little bit less, I would say I'd be more sold. The other part of the problem is that you can't really find these. So even if you wanted to look for one at $38, you can't find it at $38. Right now, most of them are being resold, and so they're going for $60 more in this case. And is that worth it? Absolutely not. I paid that price, and do I think it's worth it? No. But I did it for this review because I was very curious about the hype of the pen. People seem to be really into it. And again, it's a pretty pen. It looks nice. Handles well. It is a nice sort of design. But $24, $25, then I would say thumbs up. You know, $38, $40, it's more of a maybe. That's more of a point in which does these elements pull you enough in that direction to want to get this tool. Above that resale price, no, don't get it. You can get this, you know, cartridge and buy the regular Zento, and it would do the same sort of things. It would handle just as fine. Those particular models probably feel just as good in hand. But again, I could be mistaken when it comes to some of the Zento lines because they have the Zento Flow gel pen. Is it the exact same ink as this one in here? I'm assuming it is because these sort of lines are kind of universal in use. But correct me if I am wrong in the comments. I didn't research every other sort of like Zento lines out there. I only grabbed the one that's here. And I don't have that much more experience on the Uniball Zento lines. So again, I could be skewing my sort of like response to it, and I may have to do a little bit more testing with some of the other tools that are out there. I just was curious about this particular model, just simply due to the interest of that was out there. It was just so high, so that's why it kind of pulled me in the direction, and it that obviously won me over to go win, or I'm sorry, to pay for the pen. But now that I've gotten it, that's kind of my honest sort of opinion to it, because like I said, I have used plenty of other gel pens. And these aren't my daily sort of carries anymore. I've used them when I was a student, and they drew nicely and quickly when I was, building up a lot of content for small sketches and sort of like compositional studies or concept studies. So a tool like this one, I probably wouldn't, would I replace with one of these? Well, sure. I think this pen draws just as good, if not better, and the ink is a bit better than the other ones I've used in the past, like the Muji or the G-Tech and High-Techs. So I would say that would potentially kind of like overtake those models over there, but price point's hard to beat. So I, again, at the same day, we'll probably go back to those other Zento models, the gel pens that are a bit cheaper price point, $11-12. But even then, these ones over here, you're talking about the Muji being $1. You're talking about these pens over here maybe being $3 or $4. But again, I'm looking at old price points from back when I can remember, so it may not be necessarily within your finances as to what you want to pay for. Pen enthusiasts are probably the ones who are going to go after something like this. So again, I would potentially go for something like that, but my sort of interests lie more towards fountain pens. So testing out a gel pen is great. Would I ever buy another gel pen again like this? Unless it offered some sort of unique sort of design elements, a different sort of composition of the ink that's kind of unique as well too, may pull me in a direction. But the last time I bought a gel pen has been years. So I was very much willing to spend on this one because I haven't tested one in a long time. So I was very curious. But after this one, I'm probably not going to be getting another gel pen for a while. So I'll probably stick with my fountain pens, my fountain pen inks, a few, felt tip brush pens, the sable brush pens as well too, and just a regular brush with ink for the time being. But I will carry this around, and I may do another follow-up video eventually, maybe like another down the line, a couple months in the future, and I'll just kind of do a follow-up after doing some sketches and drawings in the book, using primarily just a Zento pen, and just get a general response as to the overall experience use once time is kind of invested into it. So in any case, hopefully that gives you guys a good sense about gel pens in general, how I like to kind of respond to these tool sets. It is a nice tool. Price point's a bit high. If it was a bit lower, probably about $5-6 less, I think it would make a difference for me. I would say it's much more attractive in terms of wanting the tool set. Also because of not having it being available. That's also another thing in which I probably wouldn't get it because it's scarce to get. It drew well, on this kind of paper. No bleeding on that. So it does have that capability depending on the paper you're using. But other than that, the Zento line, it was a good first experience. The Uniball brand I do like. I've used many of the other kind of pens in the past, but for this particular one, the signature model, I would say for those for those looking interested in it, based on this review, you can maybe make your decision as to whether you want to get one or not. At the price it's at in resale, I would say no. Based on retail, that's then based on preference of if you like gel pens or not. If it was a price drop at some point, maybe there's like a Black Friday sale, I don't know, then maybe it could be something more worth it. But for the time being, I've bought one and I probably won't buy one again. So look for more reviews. I have another one coming up. Another kind of pen I'm going to be looking at later on is this next one from Kakimori, and this is a fountain pen. So this one I'll also go into the same sort of scrutiny, break down materials, how the ink reacts. I have a special ink that I also got from Kakimori as well. So that'll be in the next video. Look forward to that, and like and subscribe. Give me any bit of feedback, comments, and thoughts based on how you like to maybe explore tools and pens. And I'll also look for others out there that can maybe play with. Look for more live streams coming up very shortly as well too. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Appreciate you hanging out.